All right, let's face it. Many women go into a doctor's office feeling intimidated, alone, and lost. Women's health care is just not talked about enough, and that has some serious consequences. Take fibroids, for example. Millions of women have these generally non-cancerous growths on their uterus, but for some, that turns into heavy menstrual bleeding or even a total hysterectomy. Tonight, we introduce you to 3 women right here in our community who say that their stories need to be heard.
I never heard of the term fibroids until I got pregnant. They just said, hey, you have some small fibroids and here's some information on it, and they sent me on my way. But when I Googled it, of course, that's the bad thing to do, was Google anything. They gave me all of this horrendous information, miscarriage and all of that. So instantly I became scared. As we began on this journey and I gave birth, my son was 4 pounds, 15 ounces. So let's fast forward. I end up having another baby. He is 4 pounds, 13 ounces. Again, they have a problem with his low birth weight. Come to find out, low birth weight is a part of having fibroids. And then I started to feel like big bulges in my stomach. So they did an ultrasound, and the fibroids had grew. They used to be micro-sized. Now they're 9 centimeters, 7 centimeters, which is the size of a grapefruit. Instead of me having 4 originally, now I have 7. Now I have to look into getting a hysterectomy, because that was also, my thought was the only option, because they didn't tell me about other options besides getting a hysterectomy.
The things they don't tell you about surgery.
So I ended up getting a hysterectomy, and I wish I had known about a myomectomy. Part of me think I didn't get that information because I don't want to say they didn't care, but I do want to say that this world is a go-go world. There's not as much conversation.
For me, it was about being discriminated against because of my weight. I had heavy periods, heavy bleeding throughout my life, and my doctors kept saying, lose weight, lose weight, lose weight. I had trouble conceiving, and my doctors wouldn't go any further in testing. They just kept saying, lose weight, lose weight. It was very frustrating because I would be experiencing symptoms, but they weren't taken seriously because of the weight. And then finally what happened was I was what I feel wrongly sterilized. I had an ovarian cyst. Well, I was going to get it medically removed. And my doctor told me before I went into surgery that if we find any instances of cancer, we're going to give you a hysterectomy. So go to surgery, come out, and my doctor tells me we had to do a hysterectomy. So of course I'm freaked out. There was no cancer. What happened was my doctor told me I had adhesions from my C-section. So that's why they did the hysterectomy. It was very hard because I was still fairly newly married, and my husband at the time and I were, wanting to have a child. And so it was very hard to accept. Plus I was just confused. If I didn't have cancer, then why did I have a hysterectomy? That was just the only thing that went through my mind. The doctor never came back and said anything, so there was never a conversation, no sense of care for me as the patient. It was just like we did what we had to do and deal with it. And at that time, I didn't even know how to process it. I didn't know what to do. So I was dealing with the complications of trying to heal from the hysterectomy. There wasn't much conversation. I didn't know how to advocate for myself. I just kind of tucked it in and just tried to heal the best I could. I don't think that our stories and our symptoms are taken seriously. And I think there's this misconception that we tolerate more pain, or our symptoms aren't as severe, that we could be over-exaggerating. And so I definitely feel like those myths that have been in the medical community for so long are things that drive us from getting adequate care. I think it says something internally about our worth, and that we're not worthy of the same care that other people get and deserve, when in actuality we are.
I'm a fibroid survivor, and for maybe 15-ish years, I had really, really heavy periods, and it was super normalized in my family. Like, it wasn't even a big deal. I would have periods for 8 or 9 days, heavy bleeding, diarrhea, cystic acne, bloating, back pains. I just remember going to this in high school, wearing double pads. You're just trying to like exist, you know, but it does give you a lot of anxiety over time because you're like, you get up from a chair, you're like, did I do something? If you laugh or cough or sneeze, like, is it good? 2012, I was like, you know what? I want a hysterectomy. I don't want to have children in this way, like, not attached. And when I went to the doctor, they didn't give me any tests. They tried to prescribe me birth control right away. And then when I said I want hysterectomy, they were like, well, your future husband is going to be very mad that you're sterile, and that could really cause divorce. And this is a female doctor. So she was like, I'm going to have to deny you. That let me know two things can be true, that the system is not set up for patients to really advocate for themselves, because when they do, all these regulations come into play, and that people are just out here slinging birth control left and right and not really looking at like what the problem is. And as I started to take the birth control, the bleeding started and never stopped. I was bleeding for months, like consistently, not like on and off. Like we're talking 1 month, still bleeding, 2 months, still bleeding. My mom actually came to visit me, and I'm bleeding literally in the produce section. Like I'm wearing jeans, bleeding through my jeans in Walmart. And I start crying. My mom starts breaking out of crying. So we end up calling our family friend, who happened to be a nurse at the time. And the first thing she said is, girl, you have fibroids. And I was like, what? She was like, you have fibroids, and this is what you need to do to cleanse your body. And I was like, okay. And she was like, you need to go vegan. You need to do a very serious vegan cleanse. They didn't offer me hysterectomy, myomectomy, a uterine ablation, nothing, just birth control. This idea that Black women or Black womb holders' pain is just not as severe. So if they come in with challenges or traumas, it's like, not that big of a deal. And so that training and that rhetoric totally controls the way people are seen in the hospital. Especially as myself, I'm the daughter of immigrant parents. So I've seen how people will treat people with different accents or people that don't speak English as their first language. So just seeing that like type of treatment, I felt very alone and very intimidated. But when she told me about the cleanse, and then in 2 weeks, my period stopped completely. And then over the 3 months, I lost 25 pounds, my acne cleared up, I wasn't bloated anymore. And it took me a while to become comfortable in even talking about this, because I was very ashamed, very embarrassed, and hated my body. I hated it because I thought it wasn't working.
I do want to say thank you to the women that sat down and talked to me. You were brave, and I appreciate you trusting us here at ABC 10 to tell your story. And tomorrow we will talk about what came next for these women and how they created a community. Melissa, who you just met, is the creator of a local documentary called The Big Histo. She put out a casting call to highlight what she calls a silent pandemic. And again, let this be a reminder to always check in with your doctor if you have any questions or concerns, and know that it is okay to get a second opinion.